A good day. I'm Jim LaRiviere, an Assistant Fire Chief here in Comox, and we're going to talk about personal emergency preparedness. And it's pretty important now with the different things happening around the world. This is generic emergency preparedness. It isn't really for any one specific thing, but as I go through this, you'll notice that there'll be some earthquake specific, because we are in an earthquake specific zone. And again, you'll often hear the number 72 hours come up throughout my presentation. And 72 hours is what they believe people need to be able to fend for themselves, feed themselves, have water, do some basic first aid. And 72 hours, they figure, is when help starts arriving from somewhere else. We're a big country like Canada, so help can start arriving from out east. And if it's a localized event, like on Vancouver Island, we can get help coming from other parts of BC. But they want us to be self-sufficient for 72 hours. Now, 72 hours doesn't mean that if it's a big event like an earthquake, that all the lights and roads and buildings will be fixed. That's just to get food and water and medical supplies in. Again, a lot of people in BC, in the Comox Valley, believe that they are already prepared. And they may look, they go, I've got water down in the basement, I got food in my pantry, I have kit out in my car. But the problem with that is it isn't all in one spot, easily grabbed and to go, because sometimes you have to go right away. If you remember the firestorms down in California and things like that, people don't often have a lot of time to grab their stuff or go find it. So it should be ready to go and grab. Sometimes you only got 5 minutes, sometimes not even that. So make sure that when you put your kits together and when you put them somewhere, that it's easily accessed. Now we're going to start talking about some of the things that are around the home that you have to be careful of. A lot of homes have natural gas, and the problem with natural gas is that it's lighter than air. It likes to go, if it leaks, it'll go up into the, into your ceilings and stuff like that. So natural gas, it's great for cooking and heating, but it can be a hazard during a disaster. If you smell the rotten egg smell, and by the way, they add that mercaptan in there so that it actually smells like rotten eggs, because if it's not, it's odorless, or you hear it hissing, and it's quite loud when there's a break, then you need to shut off your gas meter. If you don't hear that hissing or you don't smell the rotten egg smell, then don't turn off your gas meter, because you may need that for heating or cooking. So again, reemphasize, don't turn it off unless you have to. And to turn it off, in your kit, you should have a dedicated wrench. It doesn't have to be a special wrench, a spark-proof wrench. It could be just a regular crescent wrench. It should be in your kit, easily accessible, or what some people do is they have it outside, somewhere hidden around the gas meter where they can actually get it and just turn off the gas. And it's pretty simple. It's just, you've got a pipe like this, and there's a valve on it, and all you have to do is turn it at 90 degrees, and it's off. Some homes have propane, normally for cooking. Propane is different than natural gas, because unlike natural gas where you could have a whole street that's piped for natural gas, propane is actually individual cylinders for the home itself. But again, it has the same qualities of that rotten egg smell. So again, if you hear that hissing of the gas leaking, or you can smell that rotten egg smell, turn off the propane. Propane is heavier than air, unlike natural gas, which is lighter than air. So it's a bit more of an issue, because when it leaks, it goes down into low spaces like basements and crawl spaces and drains and that, where natural gas, like I said previously, just goes up into the air. So it's more of a hazard that way. Again, if you don't have to turn it off, don't, especially if you're using it for cooking. But either way, like a natural gas, if you do turn it off, or propane, and you turn it off, you're going to have to get either Fortis for your natural gas to come and check things out before it gets turned on, or your propane supplier to check it as well. And again, on an everyday event, if you have a leak, that's not a problem. But during some kind of emergency like an earthquake, they're going to be busy, may not get there. So you should have that tool I mentioned, and you should know how to turn that off. Now, hot water tanks. a lot of hot water tanks they've gotten smaller, or they've gone with different systems, but most people still have that big, huge water tank somewhere in their house. And again, it should be secured. And this is an earthquake example. You should have, there's a 1 or 2 or 3 strap method of doing that, and this is what that would look like. And again, there's ways to do that. You can go online to PEP-BC, and they will show you what equipment and tools you need to secure that. And the thing about hot water tanks, whether they're electric or natural gas, is that if they pull away from whatever they're secured to, that becomes a hazard. So securing them is important because each of them presents a different hazard. They're both connected either electrically or to your gas lines. And the thing is if they're not secured, they will separate from that and cause either an electrical shock issue or a leak from the gas. So having them secured is very important. Next thing is shutting off domestic water. Again, if you don't have to, don't shut it off. If you suspect a break, then you need to shut it off. And you need to know where your water shutoff is. Now, the communities you live in, if you have piped water, will have a shutoff somewhere in the front of your house that brings the water into your house. But it'd be good that you know where the shutoff is in your home. And they're not always in the same place. I've seen them in crawl spaces. I've seen them down in basements. I've seen them on the other side, so you need to know that, not just for something like an earthquake, but you need to know that for everyday events. So if you need to shut it off because something's damaged. So it's good to know where that is. Now we're going to talk about electricity, cooking and watching television and doing washes and doing drying clothes and stuff. If they don't turn those breakers off, then when the power comes back on, it's got to power up all of those items. So that's why you get those brownouts. And again, that could happen just during a power outage. So it's important you know where your breakers are. Sometimes they're in laundry rooms, sometimes they're in garages, but you probably already know where that is because you might have already had to deal with that. It's often a lot easier to find than the water shutoff. Note with water supply for your personal emergency preparedness kit, remember that you can go a long time without food. It's water that you can't go that long without. And when you're putting your kits together, you should have 4 liters of water per day per person. That doesn't mean that water should be used for washing dishes, washing your hands, for your pets. If you have pets and stuff like that, you should have water for them as well. And you can, however you do that, the easiest way to do that is when you look at, you get the flat of 500 milliliter bottles of water. It's easy to store, it's easy to portion out to the members of your family, and it's good for up to 2 years. So you can store that with your kit, it's good to go. There's other things you can do. You can go to some of the outdoor stores and get water purification tablets. You can, I've had suggestions, people here, where they take the milk jugs and they freeze, put the water in, freeze it, and again, that's good. What I don't recommend is that you take those same water jugs, just fill them up with water and put them in storage, because that water won't last long and you won't be able to drink it. Some of the other things is that you can fill up a bathtub if you had, before you shut the water off. Hopefully you clean the bathtub, but you can certainly use that for drinking water or for bathing or stuff like that. So the only real way, if you don't store your water or you find that you've run out of water, the only real way to take some water that's around wherever you get it and make it usable is boil it. Of course, then you got to remember that you've got to have utensils and equipment to do that. So if you don't have the gas on because you had to shut it off, you might have a Coleman camp stove and you're boiling that water. So it's a lot easier to just store your water, like I said earlier. And again, shelf life of 2 years, keep it in a cool, dark place. And then again, like anything, like your whole kit, you should be checking that regularly. So you just don't put things into the kit, such as water, and forget about it. If you never have to use it for 3 years, you should be really looking at that stuff. Emergency food supplies, you should have enough food for 72 hours or 3 days. And again, you can do things like, to expand that, you can do things like, if they're accessible, go to the fridge. Go to the fridge, there's food in there, you can use that. And even after the hydra's out, it's good for a day or two after that. Then you can go and use your freezer and use the food in there. And then you could go to your pantry and use the food in there before you even have to touch the food that's in your kit. Now, that's all dependent on whether it's accessible or not. If you can't get to the freezer because it's in the basement, you can't get to the pantry because the kitchen's not accessible, or the fridge, then of course you'll be using the food in your kit. Whatever food you have in your kit should require no refrigeration, little prep, and little use of water. Because if you're going to go down to the outdoor sports store and get the freeze-dried food and it needs water, you're going to have to add more water to that, 4 liters per person per day. Again, you should be considering anybody that has dietary needs. If somebody's a diabetic, somebody is lactose intolerant, or a celiac, then there's no sense putting food in there that they can't eat. So just be aware of that. If you have pets, like I mentioned with the water, the pets will need food as well. Now, if you've got a farm out in the district and it's the horse and cattle out there, they're okay. But when I talk about pets, I'm talking about indoor pets, such as cats, dogs, and stuff like that. You should have, especially if you put tin stuff in there, you should have a manual can opener, because remember, if the power's out, you're not going to have the electric can opener. So you should have a manual can opener. You should have paper plates, paper towels, plastic cutlery and stuff like that, because again, you have limited water. Again, you would have to store more water, as I said previously, if you want to have water for washing dishes and things like that. So just have those items. And of course, I know some people are concerned about the environmental impact of that, but this is just post-disaster. I don't recommend you do it every day, but it is a lot easier to do it post-disaster, and it's a lot more hygienic. Okay, now we're going to talk about some earthquake issues, non-structure items. Okay, so look around your house. You have pictures hanging up. You've got dining room hutches. You've got bureaus with mirrors on it and stuff like that. Those are the kind of things that you need to be aware of, that they could come down in an earthquake. Okay, so things like pictures and stuff like that, when you're hanging stuff on the wall, you should put that find the stud in the wall and put it in there. If you don't, and it's just the nail is loose in there, and during an earthquake, that could come down. Look around the bedrooms. One of the bureaus often has a large mirror on it, and if you look behind there, there's usually just a small L bracket holding that up there. So again, just be aware that in an earthquake with the shaking, that could come down. Same with the dining room hutch. If you've got a dining room hutch with a glass display case, again, you look on the back, it's got small L brackets on each side. That's all that's holding that up. And again, all around your house, pictures, like I said, and anything hanging high, make sure they're firmly secure in the little stud. Okay, some of the most dangerous rooms in the house during an earthquake one of them is the kitchen. And the reason for that is you've got, like, for example, appliances on wheels. And appliances on wheels, again, in an earthquake, can move. I'm not recommending you take the wheels off because it's easy to move them out for cleaning and that, but just be aware of that. The other item is the items in the cupboards. You know, you've got plateware, stuff up there. You might have your tin food up there and that, and just be aware that in an earthquake, those cupboards could come open. Again, not saying that you can't store stuff up there, but that's just a hazard you need to look out for. Some of the other things you might look out for is underneath your kitchen sink, because everybody's got a different cleaning products and items down there. And on a day like this with nothing happening, it's not an issue. But here's an example. You've got chlorine bleach on one side and ammonia on the other. If during an earthquake, those things break and mix, now you got your own potential mini hazardous material incident. So again, just be aware. You might want to separate them. You might want to put the bleach somewhere else, you know, because there's certain items that aren't compatible with each other once they start mixing. The second most dangerous room in the house is in a garage. Now I'm talking about an attached garage. So if you got a garage that's 30 feet from your house, that's not quite the same as if you have an attached garage. And what I mean by attached garage is that you open the door from your house and you step into your garage. So if you're lucky enough to able to store your car in there, that could be a hazard. Some of the other things in there, of course, is all those gas-powered appliances that you have, lawnmowers, snow blowers, leaf blowers, and anything that you use in a garden, such as insecticides, herbicides, and stuff like that. So you can see there's a potential for hazards out there. And again, if an earthquake, things break and mix, again, the potential for a mini hazardous material incident. And it's probably not recommended that you actually put your personal emergency preparedness kit in the garage, only because some of the things that, like the vapors that from stuff that's there, could just seep into into your storage. Some of the safe rooms. Bedrooms are safe rooms, despite what I mentioned about the mirror on the bureau. But other than that, it's a fairly safe room. So if you experience an earthquake, say it's 3 in the morning and you're sleeping, what you're expected to do is just cover up and wait for the shaking to stop. And then you can start checking out your house. But again, something you might want to consider is having some footwear that you can easily assess without getting out of bed, and a flashlight. Because there's nothing worse, especially if the windows went because of the earthquake, nothing worse than in the first 30 seconds of after the shaking stops, you get out of bed and you start stepping on the glass and you got cut feet. So you put those sturdy shoes on, flashlight, and then you go off and check. But that's after the shaking stop. Another safe room is the bathroom, mainly because where it's mostly located in a house, it's usually surrounded by the house. As firefighters, we prefer you not to go into the bathroom. We tell people not to go in the bathroom, but bathrooms are relatively safe rooms during an earthquake. So if you find yourself in the bathroom during an earthquake, if you're taking a shower, turn off the water and hold on and wait for the shaking to stop. Then you could put your towel and flip-flops on and leave. If you are in the bathtub having a bath and it starts shaking, then turn off if you had the water on, turn it off and pull the plug so the water drains out. And again, wait for the shaking stops and off you go and check the damage in the house. The tempered glass in the shower doors or shower stalls is not the same glass that's on your windows. I'm not going to say it's not going to shatter, but it shouldn't shatter as easily as the window. So that's why it's a relatively safe room. The only thing that could be a hazard in there, if you got the big wall mirror in there, I have them in my bathrooms, a lot of people do, that could be an issue. There's a way you can mitigate that. You can take it down and on the back, use duct tape or some kind of tape, and you make like the Union Jack, which is the British flag on the back. And if there was any breaking of it, it'll keep it intact and not shatter all over you in the bathroom. Most homes which are wood frame, they're relatively safe. House can suffer major structural damage if it's not attached to the foundation, but you should not find any newer homes that aren't. And if you are in an older home that you find that it's not attached, other structural hazards are unattached decks, porches, stuff like that, and chimneys. So they can all come down in an earthquake. So be aware of that. Always, when I get to this point, I've got one slide for the fire safety, but basically it's you should have a fire extinguisher not only in your home, but you should have one with your kit. And again, just make sure that it's serviceable and ready to go and know how to use it. You can either call the fire department and you can come and get taught how to use it, but the instruction plate on the front of them is very detailed and you can get a lot of information from there. But the key thing there is do it before you have a fire, not while the fire is going. Okay, now we're going to talk about sanitation. We're going to talk about sanitation like for your home, and then we'll talk about sanitation for yourself. Again, a sewer system can be damaged after an earthquake, and that's whether you have pipe sewage or you have a septic field. So the key thing there is if you suspect there's any damage is to not use it, shut it down. So I'm not saying that you can't use the toilet after you shut down either the sewage or septic, because you can. But once the water's out of the toilet bowl, you can do something like line it with a plastic bag, put some kitty litter in it, and you can use it for solid waste, feces. So that's what you can use. For liquid waste, you can do things like you wouldn't use the toilet per se, but you go out into the backyard and you got one spot where people will, males will urinate, or the bucket will be dumped from females. So it's a little delicate, but that's the way it is during the post-disaster. So again, but put it only in one spot, because apparently animals are attracted to it, so you don't want that happening. Again, once things start getting back to normal, things like your solid waste, when you take that out of the toilet, because people often ask when I change out that bag in the toilet. So you take it out when you can't stand the smell, or it's once a day. And you double bag it, put it outside in one spot, and when things start getting back to normal, there will be trucks coming around to get different things, and there'll be a truck to pick up that kind of stuff. Now, the other part of sanitation is personal sanitation. Again, with the water shut off, it's going to be tough. You won't be taking showers or baths. Water will be limited. Just as I said previously, you'll only have 4 liters per person. So again, if you want to put water in for washing and stuff like that, you have to have the extra water. So hand sanitizers are pretty good for that. They're easily packed and stored, easily used, and again, sanitation is really important post-disaster. If you don't wash your hands pre-disaster, and for some reason you get a stomach ailment, you can go to your doctor, your walk-in clinic, if it's bad enough, the ER. But just think, if it's post-disaster, your doctor's office may not be open, and the ER is going to be busy, and they do a thing called triage, so people with a lot more serious injuries are going to be at the head of the line, and your stomach ailment is not going to be one of those things. So hands sanitation is very important. When you're washing your hands, make sure you do thorough, you get under the rings, get between the fingers, and that kind of stuff. I always say that you do sing happy birthday to yourself twice, and that should be good enough. And again, you're going to use paper towels. Not very environmentally friendly, but it is post-disaster, and it's a lot more easier and hygienic than using terry cloth towels. You can imagine how many of those you would need, and even if you had that many, how fast they would become dirty and that, and then you wouldn't have anything. And trying to wash them, again, is that whole thing about water. Again, during an earthquake, telephones could be affected. A lot of people still have dial phones and stuff that sit in cradles. Again, if during an earthquake, they all come out, then they create the busy signal, and that causes problems. So put them back in the cradle for those that still have that kind of phone. Also, payphones. They still have a priority, according to TELUS, so they will get them up and running if they are become inoperative during an earthquake. But there's not that many around, so you really got to scout out where those are located. Again, people love their cell phones. The thing about an earthquake is, if the towers come down because of the earthquake, they're not reliable at all. So again, just be aware of that. Make sure they're charged. Make sure that, there's nothing worse than having 1 bar left on your phone, 2 minutes into the earthquake. Mind you, if you can get to your car, you may be able to charge it. We're going to talk about evacuation from your home. When you're evacuating from your home, there are things that you need to consider to take, and they should be easily accessible. That's your personal emergency kit and any other personal items you need to take. We'll cover that later. So you should make a floor plan for your home. If you got children, they probably already did this through school with a fire safety plan. So if you already have a fire safety plan, you don't need to make up a whole separate plan for an earthquake. Again, things that would be in that plan, whether it's your children's fire plan or if you're just making one from scratch, is how to get out of your place. Primary exits, the ones that you normally use. Secondary exits like back doors, even windows in there. You can use those if they're big enough and they open up. Again, I mentioned emergency supplies, so you should know where they are. They should be readily accessible. I've got a friend who's, it's just him and his wife live there, and they have one of those tote suitcases, and they put all their food and water and everything they want to take with them, and they keep it in a closet by the front door. So when they have to go, they just grab that and go. It's up to you where you keep your stuff. I told you, You probably shouldn't keep it in basements and in garages and that, but it should be readily accessible. And when you need to go, you need to be able to get it quickly. Have a prearranged meeting place, just like we tell that for the kids with fire safety plans. You should have a prearranged meeting place. Again, it might be just out in the yard, it might be at somewhere else, but whatever you do, if it's not around your home, and say you went to a reception center like over here at the Comox Rec Center, then you need to let people know. So, put a notice up on your door, say, we're all okay, we've taken all our gear, and at 3 o'clock, and we're over on the reception center on Knoll Avenue. That kind of thing. If you're evacuating from your neighborhood, so you might not have to evacuate from your home, depending on the damage, or you might have to evacuate from the neighborhood because something else is happening in the neighborhood. You should plan ahead on that. Again, you should look around, see what maybe lines, power lines would come down, what trees would come down. If you're on a cul-de-sac, that's really important because there's only one way in and out there with a vehicle. Now you might want to look and say, okay, just in case that power line comes down or the trees come down, we go this way over Mrs. Smith's lawn. Again, just put that in your plan. Don't actually do it for practice. Some key documents. Key documents could be, the key thing on the list is medications. You show up at the reception center and you have a whole list of medications that you did not bring the paperwork with. So you show up and you go, well, I think I'm on this and I think I'm on that. That's going to be a little more difficult getting what you need. But if you show up with it, they will. Part of the whole setup for post-disaster is they'll be able to access medical supplies and stuff like that. So it's a lot easier having your list and saying this is what I need than not having that. Some of the other stuff on that list would be, birth certificates, driver's licenses, mortgage papers, insurance, all that. And you can determine what's important on there. Again, some of the other stuff too, if you think that there's a certain memento which is small enough, like say something from a relative or something that you need to take with you, but make sure it's somewhere near and close to your kit. You don't often have time to go looking for it. So whatever you have, the papers I just mentioned or that, they should be readily accessible so you can take them and go. So now we're going to talk about what you do before an earthquake. So you complete a preparedness plan, and that's what we've been talking about. Establish plans for reunification. So say this earthquake happens during the workday, and you've got children in school on one side of the river, somebody else on the other side of the river. You go, mom works at the hospital on this side, and dad works on the other side in Courtney. So you got to come up with a plan that if this happens, where are we going to meet? If the 17th Street Bridge is not, what other bridge can we use? Can we use the 5th Street Bridge or whatever that you come up with in a plan? Some of the other things that you need to do is for family outside the province. So say, if everybody tried to get a hold of their family post-disaster somewhere else, or everybody outside the province was trying to call their family in the province, it could overload communications. So you could have, and this is just a suggestion, you could have a relative in some other province be sort of the clearinghouse. So you call them and say, hey, we're all okay. And then all the other relatives call that relative and say, what's going on? They said, well, they just called me and everything's okay. Learn which places are safe and dangerous in your home. We already covered that. Remember the safe rooms were the bedrooms and bathrooms, and the dangerous rooms were the kitchens and attached garages. Hold earthquake drills on a regular basis. Now, your children, if they're still in school, they do that on a regular basis. And there's nothing wrong with doing that at home. We encourage kids to do the fire drills, so doing a earthquake drill would be second nature to them. And again, know where your utility shutoffs are. Know how to shut off the gas if you have to. Know how to shut off the electrical panel if you have to. Know how to shut off your water if you have to. So during a quake, if you're indoors, drop, cover, and hold on. So what you're looking for is something you can get under that will give you some added protection. If you're in a place where you can't do that, then you try to find a non-outside wall in a corner and get down and cover your head and duck. If you're out and about in a shopping mall and an earthquake happens, then you need to find a place away from all the plate glass windows and stuff like that. See if you can get into the stores and find that same location to cover yourself from an earthquake. But it's going to be tricky, especially if the mall is full of people. If you're on a bus, again, the bus will probably stop. You're not going to get off the bus till the shaking stops, but you can duck, cover, hold in the seat you're in. Just be aware what kind of bus you're on. Some buses have luggage racks above them, like the travel buses. Some of those are enclosed, like on an airplane. Some are open. And then, like on a school bus, they don't have them at all. But just be aware of your surroundings, that whatever's up above you could come down. If you're in your vehicle, you can just pull over somewhere, stop, but don't stop on a bridge or an underpass or a tunnel. Just try to get out and get away from that. If there's somebody that's in a wheelchair, again, it's a little tough to get under a table or some heavy object to do the drop, cover, hold on. So again, they would try to find that same corner that I mentioned earlier and lock their wheels and cover up. If you're outdoors, stay outdoors. Don't come back into the building. So if you're outdoors, stay outdoors and be far enough away from the building. Here's a good rule of thumb. If the building, you look at the building and it's 10 feet high, then try to be 15 feet at least away from that. So you're outside what we call the collapse zone. And again, just stay away from trees, stay away from power lines. If you're in a big open field, you're fine. So some other things to remember after an earthquake is that if you suspect a gas leak and you don't turn your power off, don't be throwing any switches or closing any breakers, because just a little spark, if it's the right mix, will set that natural gas or propane to explode. So just don't turn them off. Once you've checked on yourself and your family and that, you can check on your neighbors and make sure you've got good footwear on, and so you go over and offer your assistance. Tsunamis. We don't often talk of tsunamis a lot here on the Salish Sea side of things, because we often talk about them on the west coast of the island, and they often think that by the time they work their way around the northern tip and down the Straits of Juan de Fuca, that it won't be much of an issue. But there could be a localized earthquake in the area. Tsunamis are also caused by landslides, caused by volcanic eruptions, and in some really rare instances, large meteors. So the thing is that most of them are caused by earthquakes, and doesn't seem to be that call for that kind of preparation here on the Salish Sea. But having said that, tsunamis, once they're going, they could be traveling at about 800 kilometers an hour, so that's quite fast. Their waves can be as high as 60 meters. Now, often you hear people talk about, hey, it just went up an inch or two. I just said it could be up to 60 meters. Not everyone's going to be like that. If you're in an earthquake zone, which we are, and you're in places on the coast like Seward or Tofino or Ucluelet, they often have tsunami warning sirens and directions to get to higher ground. So just, if you visit those places, take a look around. See where the signage is saying, this is where you go in the event of a tsunami. And if it's an earthquake shaking for any longer than 20 seconds, then you should be heading to higher ground without waiting for the siren. Don't go near the shore to be a looky-loo to see what's going on. Again, because if it's gonna happen, it's gonna be quick and it's gonna be dangerous. And if you can't get to higher ground, then get to the second floor, if that's available, or higher in the home, and be on the non-approach side of the tsunami. Again, there's other scenarios that we just talked about before, during, and after earthquakes, because that's what the prevalent hazard here is. Probably if you're in Florida, they talk more about hurricanes than earthquakes. If you're on the prairies, they talk about tornadoes more than earthquakes. But the thing is, we talk mostly about earthquakes here. But remember, it's a generic emergency preparedness. A lot of what I've said today you can use for all types of emergencies. And again, in the valley, though, we could have flooding. we could have hazardous material incidents, and we could have large fires, whether that's forest or a large industrial type fire. So those things can still happen. Again, and for any other information you need, I just gave you a very basic touch on personal emergency preparedness. So some misconceptions of emergencies is they're short-lived. Some can be though, like, you know, if it's a power outage of 4 hours, that's an emergency, but it's not quite the same as an earthquake. You know, there are countries today, rich countries like Japan and New Zealand, who are still recovering and rebuilding from the earthquakes they had. And that's some time ago. And you know that whole 72-hour thing, when I said that doesn't mean your roads are repaired and your bridges are built and the buildings are back up. They're still doing that. And then you got a poor country like Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, and I don't know if it will ever rebuild. There's people still living in tents from that disaster. Some people don't think they'll ever have to deal with an emergency. I guess it depends on what they define an emergency. Like I said, a power outage can be, you know, and maybe they've been lucky enough not even to experience that. You know, and maybe they've never experienced or will never experience an earthquake or a tornado or a hurricane. But it does happen to a lot of people. Another misconception is they can't prepare. Well, you've already sat through this. You're going to go online probably to get more. Maybe you're already halfway there or all the way there on your personal emergency preparedness. So people can prepare. People think it takes too much time. It does take some time. You can go, and if you got lots of money and not a lot of time, you can buy all the kits already pre-made. But if you don't want to spend a lot of money and you got a lot of time, you can put that kit together yourself with personal food that you prefer and stuff like that. So for some people, it would take a lot of time, for others not. The 3 keys to personal emergency preparedness is know the risks, make a plan, and get your kit ready. And like I said, you can go to any number of agencies for additional information on personal emergency preparedness. Thank you.